I wasn't,
Testing, testing.
By who?
no, they're talking. Please turn on your microphones. In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act of 1975, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided. If any member has reason to believe this meeting is being held in violation of this act, they should state so at this time. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we'll have the roll call
Mrs. Werner,
here.
Mr. Venuto,
Here.
Mr. Lewin,
Here.
Mrs. Notch,
Here.
Ms. Sheehan,
Here.
Mr. Walsh,
Here.
Mr. Zexer,
Here.
Mr. Yeager,
Here.
Ms. Stevenson.
Here.
Thank you.
And before we do the oaths of office, we'd like to welcome Mr. Yeager to the board.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Okay, so you're right, oaths of office.
Who is it that's being sworn in tonight?
So we have Mary Notch, Timothy Walsh, Teresa Werner, Michael Yeager, and Sarah Stevenson.
Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read it, and then you're going to say if you agree. Okay? So, each of you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of New Jersey, that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and to the governments established in the United States and in this state, under the authority of the people, and that you will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all the duties of the office of zoning board of adjustment member according to the best of your ability, and that you will not use your office to grant preferential treatment, nor to seek personal gain, favor, or advantage not available to the general public. Do each of you so agree?
Yes.
You do.
Congratulations, thank you for serving. And if you could sign your form, do each of you have a form? Are you to see you sign your form? I have my glasses on, and I will notarize it for you. If you pass it down this way, we'll collect them, I'll notarize them and give them to Karen. Thank you. Madam Chair, you can move forward.
Okay, so the next thing is the election of a chairperson. We need a nomination.
I'd like to nominate Terry Werner.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? Okay. Mr. Venuto motions, Ms. Sheehan seconds. Mr. Lewin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Ms. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we'll have the election of the vice chair, and I would like to make a nomination for Sam Venuto.
My second.
Any other discussion? Mrs. Werner motions, Mrs. Notch seconds. Mr. Lewin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Ms. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item is the appointment of our board attorney, and I would like to nominate Richard King of King Barnes.
I'll second.
Hey, Mrs. Werner motions, Ms. Sheehan seconds. Mr. Lewin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Ms. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. You know I enjoy this probably more than anything else I do lawyering. I do, actually. I'm kidding, actually. Yeah.
Okay, now we also need a motion to approve the resolution appointing Richard King as board.
I'll make the motion.
So, Mr. Zetzer
I'll second.
and Mrs. Notch.
Okay, Mr. Zexer motions, Mrs. Notch seconds. Mr. Lewin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Ms. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. We have the appointment of our board engineer and planner, and I would like to nominate Craig Hurlis of Hurlis Planning and Engineering.
I'll second.
Mrs. Werner motions, Ms. Sheehan seconds. Mr. Lewin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Ms. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, and a motion to approve the resolution appointing Craig Hurlis as the board engineer.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Mr. Venuto motions, Mr. Zexer seconds. Mr. Lewin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Ms. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Does he enjoy it as much as Rich?
He works a lot harder.
Okay, we have the adoption of the meeting dates and times. We need a motion and a second.
So move.
Second?
Mr. Lewin motions, Ms. Sheehan seconds. Mr. Lewin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Ms. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll see something about it.
Okay. We need to designate the official newspaper for public notices. Right now, council is using the Herald.
Yeah, the Herald is the official newspaper. There aren't two official newspapers. That's the newspaper you have to publish in. If for some reason the Herald isn't publishing, then the backup is the Atlantic City Press. But it's not something where if you just happen to miss the deadline for the Herald or whatever, you get to do the Atlantic City Press. If the Herald is being published, that's where our citizens go to see what's going on. That's where people have to publish. So I'm putting that on the record because I get asked the question sometimes by council, and I tell them that I know the intent because I said it at the meeting when we passed it. So you're voting to make the Herald the official paper. If that's not publishing, then they can publish in the Atlantic City Press.
I make the motion.
I'll second.
Mrs. Notch motions, Ms. Sheehan seconds. Mr. Lewin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Ms. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the next, we need a motion for the minutes of November 14th, 2024.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
I'll second.
Okay.
Mr. Venuto and Ms. Stevenson.
Okay. Mr. Venuto motions, Ms. Stevenson seconds. Mr. Lewin?
Abstain.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Ms. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Abstain.
Thank you.
Now we need a motion to approve the minutes of December 12th, 2024.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay, I got that one. Ms. Sheehan motions, Mr. Lewin seconds. Mr. Lewin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Ms. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you. Can we go on to the other resolutions?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So we have a resolution for Christopher Roner, 1514 Velvento Avenue. Would somebody,
I just want to say something about that one. We did something that we don't usually do on that one, so I just want to go over the voting. On that one is the one we voted on twice. We voted, had to do with a height of a fence and moving it back a little bit. We gave them 2 ways to win, basically, and they lost both, to my recollection. So, but the first one, everyone voted no. On the second one, 4 voted no and 3 voted yes. So what I'm going to ask is that anyone who voted yes, the 3 of you who voted yes on the second one, just abstain from this resolution, and let the people who voted no both times vote yes on this resolution. Okay? So basically, all you need to know is, if you weren't here, abstain. If you voted, and you voted yes at all during that application, then abstain. Everyone else should vote yes. Okay? Anybody have any questions? Okay, go ahead.
so we need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Hey, Ms. Sheehan motions, Mr. Venuto seconds. Mr. Lewin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Ms. Sheehan?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
I believe abstain.
All the yeses have gone, so that's the good news.
Okay,
got all
thank you. Mr. Venuto?
Mr. Venuto, you have to answer. You said
Voted no all the way.
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
abstain.
Thank you.
Okay. Who were the yes votes on that? 1, 2,
Well, I think, Tim, did you vote?
I voted yes.
For no for both of them, the fences for both? Or did you vote yes for the 4-foot?
If you voted yes on either question last time, then you should abstain this time.
The first application was for the 6-foot-high fence. I voted no for that.
Right.
And that allowed them to have the 4-foot fence.
Oh,
The
right.
second was to have the fence moved back, and I voted no on that.
You voted no both times.
Yeah, okay,
He did, I remember.
yeah.
That can't be right.
Do you have 3 abstains?
Everybody voted no the first
Okay,
time.
I was told the vote was 4-3, so there
Correct.
can only be 4
4-3.
people who should be voting yes in this resolution. So if there's 5, someone is mistaken.
Mr. Ledwin voted, you were in favor, so Ledwin, Zexer, and Werner were in favor. So they would be the abstain.
Abstain.
We're counting the yeses.
Yes.
People voted, only 2 people should have voted, there's 7 votes, right?
Yeah.
And the last one was 4, it was 4,
4-3.
oh wait, it was 4 noes and 3 yeses.
So,
Right. So then that means only 4 people voted no both times. So that means there should be only 4 yeses today. If someone has,
so Mr. Levin, would you like to change your vote?
No.
He
Did you
voted
vote
yes.
did you vote yes either time last week?
I voted yes the first one and no the second.
Okay, then you would need to abstain.
Right, Karen?
Yeah, yes, you did. That's how you
Then-
voted.
then
So
can
do
you
you want
change your
to?
vote to abstain?
Abstain.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're square now. Thank you. It was confusing. We don't usually do that, but we try to.
Sorry.
That's what we get for trying to help.
So the next resolution was for Ana Diaz-Rue and Jose Tapia Granados. We need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Mr. Setzer, seconded by Mrs. Walsh.
Okay,
No,
thank you,
Mrs.
Mrs. Notch. So we have a motion by Mr. Zexer, seconded by Mrs. Notch. Mr. Levin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Ms. Sheehan?
Yes,
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we have an added resolution for the facts and conclusions of the Zoning Board of Adjustments for the 2023 decisions that we all discussed at the last meeting. We just have a resolution now to say that we had that discussion. So we need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Venuto motions, Mr. Levin seconds. Mr. Levin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Ms. Sheehan?
yes,
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes care of everything, you agree? Okay. Okay, so we're ready for our application.
Mr. King, would you like to announce the adjournment of the Young application?
Of which one?
The Young application's the second one listed on the agenda.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
There's an application on our agenda, William and Emily Young, 122 Decatur Street, Block 1041, Lot 6, for variance relief. That application, at the request of the applicant, has been adjourned to March 27, 2025, same time and place, 6 o'clock in this room. There will not be another published notice. This is your notice, so if you wish to be heard on that application, you should appear here at 6 o'clock on March 27, 2025. Thank you.
Okay, so our application is for 1206 Merlin Avenue, Block 1132, Lot 8. This is an appeal from the decision of the zoning officer.
Good evening, board members. My name is Lindsay Newcomb. from the law firm of Monzo, Cadenas, Delalas, here tonight on behalf of Steve Kowalek. The property address is 1206 Maryland Avenue. Steve is here with me tonight. He is a representative, he is the applicant of the owners of the property, Harold and Judith Kowalek and Donald and Susan Miller. Steve is also a registered architect and professional planner in the state of New Jersey, and once he puts his qualifications on the record, if the board accepts him as an expert, he will testify in that way as well. We are here tonight on two separate applications that are being combined. Well, one will be first, and then depending how that goes, the other one will be heard. The first is an appeal of a zoning denial dated September 23rd, 2024. The denial was for the alteration of a detached garage at 1206 Maryland Avenue. The denial was based upon the requirement for a variance for a change in use. A copy of the zoning denial and the notice of violation were submitted with a part of that application. The property owner was doing renovation work on the detached garage. The garage door was removed as a part of that process, which converted the detached garage to an other outbuilding under the zoning code. As you know, garage and other outbuilding have different bulk standards. Accordingly, we understand that variance relief is required to permit the renovation to convert the building to an other outbuilding. That will be the second part of this application if the appeal on the first part is granted. The appeal isn't based on the categorization of the renovation as an other outbuilding. The appeal is based on the determination by your zoning officer that habitable area was created in this accessory structure.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Sure,
And I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I understand. But
sure.
if you, thank you, Machine. If you agree that this went from being a garage to an outbuilding, and that change of use occurred outside of the permitted building area, meaning it's in a side yard or a rear yard, don't you need a variance no matter what, or you disagree? Like,
We do, that's the second application.
so we get to the second one no matter what? Because when you say it depends how it goes, I think it doesn't.
Well, it does only
Just
because.
how many we consider in the second one, right?
Well, no, it does actually depend if we get there, because if habitable, it's our position that habitable area was not added to this out structure. However, if it was, that changes the variance request to a D variance, right? That we aren't here before the board on. We'll have to figure out how to address that. If habitable was added, it is a second principal structure. Again, it's our position that it was not added. That's why we're appealing that decision. But I fully acknowledge that we need to apply for bulk variance relief for other outbuilding for this accessory structure. Does that make sense?
I'm sure it does. You said it, so it probably makes sense. It just, I may not understand it. So, and this is just, I want to make sure we vote on the right stuff. So
Sure.
what you're appealing is not the decision that this became an outbuilding, a other outbuilding?
Correct.
Okay, you're not appealing that.
I am not.
So we agree that you're changing the use in the structure, and that structure is in the setback.
Yes.
So you definitely need some kind of variance for that.
Yes.
So we're going to get to a second issue.
Yes.
Second here, okay.
Yep.
What you're not sure about is, depending on how they vote on whether this is habitable space.
Right.
When we get to the second part, you might also need a D variance when we get to that.
If this is determined that it's habitable space, this application will be converted from one for bulk variance relief for an outbuilding to a D variance for a second principal structure on the lot, which was not a part of our application. So I believe, unless the board disagrees, in which case we could proceed in that manner, certainly, that we would need to come back before the board for that application.
Okay, then I misunderstood. When I heard you were also including a variance request with your appeal, I assumed that you had the use variance.
I did not. I did not. The answer is we did not. Again, if the board is inclined to hear that, we can proceed on that. But again,
Did you notice for that?
No, that's why I don't think that that's appropriate. But if the board wants to hear it, by all means.
We can hear whatever we want.
Right,
but
exactly.
It doesn't mean it's a valid hearing,
Right.
so we
Yep.
can do it. Okay, all right, good. Now, I understand better now, thank you.
Okay. Does the board have any questions? I know that was, no? Okay. So as I was saying, the appeal is not based on the categorization of the renovation as converting the space to an other outbuilding. We understand that in the removal of the garage door itself and putting in a regular door, that conversion occurred, that this garage, although not moved, not changed in size, requires bulk relief to exist as an other outbuilding at that location. So if the board agrees with us tonight on our appeal that habitable space was not created, we will be proceeding for bulk variance relief for an other outbuilding in the setbacks. So in talking about the appeal, the zoning officer's notice of violation states that the accessory structure must be returned to the condition it existed prior to the alteration work that was done. Building must remain a detached two-car garage with no habitable space. That's where we get to this habitable space issue. The determination that habitable space area was created is important because other outbuildings can't be used for human habitation or for living space. So an other outbuilding cannot have habitable space. Such, that's the basis for our appeal. It's our position that the habitable area has not been created in the renovation of the structure. Habitable area is a defined term under the city code. It's defined as an interior finished room enclosed by a floor and ceiling and permanent weather-resistant walls, which has a minimum floor-to-ceiling height of 6.5 feet, which is intended primarily for human occupancy. It's also important to note that living accommodations have not been created during this renovation. Living accommodations is also defined in your city code. A living accommodation is a kitchen, bathing facility, sleeping quarters, toilets and toilet facilities, or any other improvement intended to support human habitation. So we go back to that kind of habitable area, human habitation portion of this. So again, it is our position tonight on appeal that habitable area has not been created in this other outbuilding, that we acknowledge we need to proceed for variance relief for the other outbuilding, but that habitable area has not been created. What you'll hear in testimony from Mr. Kowalek, the owner, is that the other outbuilding has always been insulated. There was drywall on 3 of the 4 walls. The only area that wasn't insulated was the garage door itself. That it has always had electricity run to it. There's nothing new there. There is no water run to it now. It does not have a bathroom. It does not have any of the qualifications that would make this property intended for human, or not this property, that building intended for human occupancy. Rich, do you want to swear Stephen, and I'll ask him some questions?
Sure. Sir, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, and our board engineer is being sworn in as well?
I do. I do.
Steve, you're here tonight as an authorized representative of the property owners and the applicant on this application, correct?
Yes.
And you are also a registered architect and professional planner in the state of New Jersey, is that correct?
I am.
Can you put your qualifications on the record for the board?
So I have a master's in architecture from NJIT that I received in the year 2000. I've been licensed by the state of New Jersey as a registered architect since 2005, as a licensed professional planner since 2006. Licenses are all in good standing. For a long time, my father and I were partners. He founded our firm back in 1976. He just retired only a few years ago. He just turned 91. But I had the benefit of over 20 years of working at his side and all of his lengthy experience. I appeared in front of many boards all over the state, not this one, I'm happy to be here. But I think that sums it up.
Will the board accept Mr. Kowalek as an expert
Yes.
in planning and architecture tonight?
Yes, although my question goes not to his qualifications as an architect or planner. That's fine. But is he someone connected to the owner?
Go ahead, Steve.
There's 4 owners of record on the property, 2 of whom are my parents,
Okay.
2 of whom are my wife's parents. In actuality, there's 8 contributing owners, so it includes my wife and myself, my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, and, as I mentioned, my parents and my wife's parents. So
So when you testified to the past use and the intended use, which I assume you're going to do tonight, you're doing that based on personal knowledge?
correct,
So
correct.
I wanted to get, okay, good, thank you.
Steve, you kind of did a little bit, but can you just briefly explain your history with this property for the board?
Sorry, Ms. Newcomb.
No, that's okay.
So, no, that's fine. Sure. So, you know, sort of lifelong relationship with Cape May. My family and I vacationed here for almost as long as I can remember. And when my wife and I got married in 1997, we started coming down as a whole group. So her whole family, my whole family, and did that for many years and always talked about, you know, trying to find a place that we could call home. Once the grandkids started appearing, it became really evident that we really needed to find some place. So in 2008, we were fortunate enough to find this property. At that time, it was a single-story, kind of modified shotgun house. We designed an addition. We constructed two stories on top, and that was designed really to accommodate the 4 households that are part of this property. So there's room for, you know, both sets of grandparents, and there's room for the 2 kind of younger families to be comfortable and to all kind of use the house. And we do all use it together, so we often are all there together. We use it separately, we use it in various combinations of households. So it's kind of just a home base for the extended family that was formed when my wife and I got married. We do also rent the property for usually about 8 weeks in the summer. We keep some of the summer for ourselves. But we do sort of make the most use of it in the off-season. We're here on holidays, we're here on weekends, various times throughout the year.
And Steve, just to correct the record, I guess, for the benefit of the board, an error on the application. Do you have a mercantile license for this property?
We do.
Can you talk a bit about the renovation and the scope of work that was completed there?
Sure. So, you know, when we built the addition, and that was back in 2010, we intended to make improvements to this structure at that time as well. And at that time, the structure was more or less it functioned the same way. It's never functioned as a garage. It was, you know, when we bought the house, there was a large workbench in there. There were storage racks in there. You know, it was clearly used as a workshop and a storage space, and that's how we always used it as well. So because we do rent the house for those few weeks in the summer, we need a place to keep our things. So we always had a spare fridge, at least one spare fridge, sometimes more than one, that was out there where we kept you know, food and frozen stuff. We always had canned goods and dry goods storage out there. But then that was also the same place where the lawnmower was, and the bikes and the beach stuff and the tools and the building supplies and household supplies and all that kind of stuff. So it was always kind of a jumble. And because of the condition of the garage door, which was not great, basically the garage door never really functioned properly. And it was an oddball size. It's about 4 inches shorter than a standard garage door, so I could never replace it. It had a sizable hole in it that could never be repaired because it was made of an obsolete material. So we always, I mean, somehow, you know, piles of leaves would find their way under that door. Everything that could creep and crawl would find their way under that door. So, you know, as a storage space, and a place to sort of work on your bike, work on your fishing gear, whatever it might be, it was always a little musty, a little kind of creepy to be in there, filled with leaves, filled with bugs. Very difficult to keep, very difficult to keep organized. So after sort of years of living with it this way, and as I said, we intended to make the improvements back when we did the house, but we really just kind of, I guess, ran out of steam at a certain point. It was a sizable renovation. We were kind of, by the time we got to the end of it, we were exhausted and didn't really want to continue at that point. So, finally it got to the point where the shingles on the roof were very degraded. The siding, didn't match for one, was also kind of, had seen better days. Garage door, as I mentioned, was in bad shape. The finish inside was getting mildewy from dampness and whatever else. So it was just time to give it a little bit of a once-over. So we did replace the shingles on the roof. We put new siding on two sides, the two sides that are visible to us. We did eliminate the overhead door. We added a man door in the front. We added a small window in the front-facing portion. There's an existing man door on the side, which we didn't touch. That stayed in place. We did replace an existing window on the side. And we also replaced some exterior lighting. As far as the interior, we replaced the wall finish with new sheetrock and the ceiling as well. We didn't touch the insulation. Insulation remained. The only, as Lindsay mentioned, the only place we added insulation was in that on that front wall. And then we created a couple of sort of discrete storage areas so that we can better segregate kind of the different things that are kept in this building. So the door that faces the driveway leads into a discrete room about 10 by 12, which is where we intend to keep beach items. And that's the only way into that little room. The existing door on the side leads into the main room, which again is just kind of mainly an open space. It has kind of an L shape now because of the creation of that other room that opens to the driveway.
Steve, you heard me say as well, but just to confirm, there was always electric in that
Absolutely.
outbuilding, correct?
Right. So there were outlets all around. There were lights all throughout the ceiling. There were lights on the outside, and there's also an existing sub panel in there. So there's an underground feed from the house that feeds an existing sub panel inside the building.
And obviously, at this point, you understand that because of the removal of that garage door, that this project required approval, and that inadvertently was not obtained when it was necessary. But you are here tonight requesting that approval at this time, correct?
Correct.
And based on your personal experience, your knowledge of the work, as a professional, can you confirm that this structure is not intended for human occupancy?
No, absolutely not. I mean, it's, as you mentioned earlier, it lacks all of those sort of key elements that would make it suitable for habitation or for living accommodations. There's no plumbing of any kind, so there's no access to running water. There's no access to drainage, even if you had running water. There's no cooking facilities. There's no sleeping facilities. It's really intended to be used the way it was used before, which was, a workshop area / storage area.
So, board members, what you've heard from Mr. Kowalek tonight, as both with his personal knowledge as well as a professional, is that there was no addition of habitable area in this case. There is no intent for human occupancy. There is no ability for the space to be occupied. There is no restriction on adding an extra wall of insulation. The electricity was already there. An outlet may have been moved, as Mr. Kowalek said, but that doesn't change the use of this. In fact, it's quite common. Garages or outbuildings are approved all the time in the city that are both insulated and have electric. So we're asking tonight that you approve our appeal of the zoning denial as to the addition of habitable space in this structure. And obviously, Mr. Kowalek is available should the board have any questions.
Did he testify to temperature control?
Did you testify?
He did
I
not.
believe so.
I didn't. I mean, we would like to add some climate control in there just because the humidity's always been an issue.
So you want it heated and air conditioned?
Well, yeah, I mean, we were thinking of doing like a combination unit that would provide heating and cooling.
If I might add something, it says on the fire department recommendations that you're going to put heat in it. It's a heat source that's
Yeah.
fossil fuel heat source. What are they talking about there?
No, there's no, anything that, the only access to fuel we have there is electricity, so there would be there's no potential for a fuel burning appliance there.
It does say if a fossil fuel heat service is going to be used.
Right, yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, no, there's no,
Fossil fuel, I would assume, then would be fireplace or wood stove or something like that?
there's no gas line or anything like that feeding the,
This is already constructed, right?
yes.
Are there any pictures you want to put in the record?
Sure. Mr. Kowalek
I
has
mean,
some
I may
photos.
have missed it in the packet, but I couldn't find a picture of the inside of what's built. Is it in there somewhere?
Yeah, well,
The zoning,
it's hard to see.
it was
I
attached,
saw that, but that's what that was the zoning officer's report or something. I saw that, but
That's the one thing that showed.
I mean, it's your record. If you don't want to, you don't
Yeah,
have
no,
to.
we can. Mr. Cowell-
Everyone's trying to get a feel for what this inside is, and
Yeah.
picture would save 1,000 words.
there is, the plan that was submitted has a layout, a floor plan of the interior, which is helpful. But Mr. Kowalek did bring photos tonight.
There is a picture, there's two pictures on it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I thought that there were.
Construction, it appears.
What's the floor?
Right now, it's concrete.
Is that what it's going to be?
Most likely, it might we might do an epoxy finish on it or something like that.
Was there any additional space added to the building going towards the center of the yard?
No. The outer envelope and the footprint have not changed.
And the roof angles and anything didn't change?
The roof did not change in the least. no.
Okay.
Can you
So-
move that microphone a little closer? I'm having a hard time hearing.
I'm
Thank you
sorry.
so much.
Is this in the HPC area?
No.
No, it's not.
Okay.
That's actually, the engineer's report identifies it as in the historic district. I think it probably was just a carryover, but this is not in the historic district.
Excuse me, did I understand that there was an area that was enclosed that's 8 by 10 inside the shed area?
It's about 10 by 12.
10 by 12?
Right.
Doesn't that, with walls, doesn't that make it a habitable area?
Well,
I mean, I talked to zoning.
it's basically, so I don't know if it's helpful to look at the plan. That's a discrete space that opens onto the driveway. And I mean, if
There's-
it's habitable, it would be very inhospitable, it's a rectangular room with no windows and.
Right.
Adding
Nothing but a
in
door.
partition walls inside an outbuilding, under the city, the strict definitions under the city code, partition walls do not create habitable space. Again, there's no intent for human occupancy or ability to occupy. There's no running water, there's no kitchen. Back to the definition.
What does occupy
I'd
mean?
like to hear, zoning officer.
Other than a human, who's going to occupy it?
I don't know, but that's what the definition says, intended primarily for human occupancy.
Yeah, I know, okay, I'm asking you to persuade the, I mean,
Well, I
So-
think
I'll let the
you
board answer
can,
the question. I have a lot of
If-
questions. I mean, one of the difficulties of this, and you have to understand, is that this is sort of like an interpretation. Okay? It's an appeal, but it's an appeal of an interpretation. So what we decide here is sort of giving guidance on what we think our ordinance means. So if everyone can just build 4 walls, doors, and windows with heating and air conditioning, and that's okay, then how do we know if it's a dance studio? How do we, like, you can make anything inside those walls, because it's not a garage, it's not a shed, it's not a, so it's very difficult to,
Well, if I might, I think that would be true of almost anything, even if it were a garage. It's very difficult to say, well, what goes on inside that.
But if it were a
that-
garage, it
that-
most likely wouldn't have finished rooms.
it has a garage door. I mean, I get
Well-
it, like, I've seen garages
think-
that have couches and TVs. I mean, I understand that. but
Right.
I think it's
still a
important.
garage, like, the next door person could park a car in it, like, it.
So I think it boils down, so what I don't like about the word occupancy, as an architect, occupancy is a very broad term that covers, anything that people can do, not all of which is necessarily construed as being habitable. So even a garage is still occupied by humans, right? Because you're in there when you're parking your car. So occupancy to me is not the best term. I think the spirit of when we talk about habitable space in general is that it refers to livability in terms of a place where people have sanitary facilities, where they have cooking facilities,
separate
where
thing for that,
where they sleep.
But
That's-
they correlate, right? The definition of a living accommodation refers to human habitation, right? So we have to look at the human habitation. It says kitchens, bathing facilities, sleeping quarters, toilets, and toilet facilities, or any other improvements intended to support human habitation, right? And then we look to the definition of habitable area, and again, it refers back to human occupancy. So those two definitions are related and required to be looked at, I think, largely together. I think it's why they were both in the zoning violation, and I think they were why they were in your engineer's review memo.
Okay, so if someone put mirrors all around these interior walls and operated a dance studio in there, what's changed about the building?
I mean, that would be a commercial use. That's,
But suppose it wasn't commercial, they had 10 granddaughters, and they put their dances in there. I mean,
I'm not seeing how those are connected to what he's proposing.
Okay, but we're not, we regulate uses and structures. okay?
Right.
And the structure is somewhat defined by the use. So if they sell this tomorrow, this is set up to be an office, a dance
Does-
studio. It can be anything. It's
When
it has windows and doors.
applications-
It's very difficult.
When applications without structures, whether they're garages or otherwise, come before this board, my experience here, as well as the experience of other resolutions that we've looked at, don't look at whether the garage has air conditioning and heating. You don't look at whether there are partitions in it. They can have partitions in a garage. People do it all the time. So adding a partition doesn't create habitable space here. That's not what your
The word partition
definition
never came out of my
says.
mouth. I think it's.
But
been
putting
talking
heat
about
and air conditioning does make it habitable.
Right. And you have electric, so you could put electric heat in there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
That's-
already.
And the fact that you took away the garage door, you're now making it not a garage,
door.
but a whole nother living facility.
There's no garage door.
I mean.
You heard from Mr. Kowalek why they took out the garage door. It wasn't a door that could be replaced because of its size. It was in ill repair. Nobody ever parked cars in there. It was not, for all intents and purposes, a functional garage. So we agree, we need to come before this board for relief tonight. We're not saying that what he did was in due course or the right thing to do without coming here first. He is fully acknowledging that.
No one's in the punishment. My board doesn't punish.
Yeah.
They do zoning. I've told that a million times. No one's going to do that. Okay? They treat it as if you were just about to do it. So they're just trying to understand it. Okay? And whether we like the word habitable or we like the word occupancy, we don't write the things.
Right,
Okay? This is the ordinance.
right.
So there's a section on living accommodations. I agree, these are not living accommodations.
Right.
All right? Well, I don't totally agree with that, because it says, or any other improvements intended to support human habitation. But where we're focused, and where I'm instructing the board to focus, is on the concept of intended primarily for human occupancy. And then there's certain structures that are permitted, even though they be occupied by humans. Garages,
Other outbuildings.
whatever else is out there, okay? So, yeah, but, no, other outbuildings is a different thing. Let's go to that section so we can talk about that for a second. The permitted uses.
The code is open on my phone. I apologize to the board. I didn't print it before I
No,
came.
Craig's engineering report
Okay,
is
all right.
probably one of the
I
best
wasn't
engineering
being-
reports I've ever read. So we can go to that, and everything is in there.
I didn't know where you were reading.
You did a great job on it. No, this is,
Well, thank you.
I've been substituting for my partner in other townships, and I see the engineering reports they get, and they're not this.
Well,
So I should let you do the talking.
what's the question?
Well, we're trying to figure out where this fits. I mean, no detached garage may contain living accommodations, so we got that.
Right. So I think the applicant has conceded that it is not a detached garage.
Got it.
Okay, so,
And that's why I'm saying
and when I
living
wrote this
accommodations.
report, that was still in question, so.
But if it's
So I
not,
would
how can
direct
you
you to
say
other
it's not a
outbuildings.
detached garage?
Sorry?
How can you say it's not a detached garage?
Because there's no garage door anymore.
It's an outbuilding.
But that's only because he took it off. If we say you have to put it back on, then it becomes a detached
Well, I have a
garage.
question with parking as,
Yeah.
parking calculation, because there's nothing calculated for that anyway. But regardless, it was a detached garage. When it
Right.
had the garage door on it, it was a detached garage. I think it meets that standard. Now, taking that away, now you're bifurcating it, and there's no ability to park in that, and you're using it for storage and other workshop space, and I don't think, it was in question, but the more that I hear the applicant describe what the improvements are in there, I think it's another outbuilding. Now, and I think what Rich is,
What I'm getting to is-
Rich is talking about an interpretation. And it's more of reading, and Lindsay touched on the two definitions that I think you guys should be paying attention to, and they're on page 9 of my report. One is for habitable area, and the other is for living accommodations.
But Craig, can I just?
I'm sorry.
I'm going to let you do that. That's it. I don't want to skip this part.
Okay.
On the outbuilding section,
Right.
Ms. Newcomb, if I called you Lindsay, I apologize. I'm just used to calling you Lindsay. But Ms. Newcomb,
It's my name.
it's section E, okay, on other outbuildings,
On page 6 of 9 of the very top.
on the very top of page 6. And I don't mean to be lawyerly about it, and I'm not telling anyone how to vote. I'm just trying to get a structure for thinking about it. How they vote is entirely up to them, and I am not absolutely sure about this myself. So it says, "No outbuilding may be used for human habitation or living accommodation." And what that, as a matter of just structure, means that they're two different things. Because when you have "or" between two words, it means that they are two different things, okay? So when we start mushing about, and that's why when we start about living accommodations and winter and all that, I'm saying that's, to me, is irrelevant, because you can't use it for either one of them. Okay, so the fact that they have running water and all that, that's an issue when you're deciding if it's a living accommodation. So, but this also can't be used for human habitation. So if it fits in this habitable area, this habitable concept, that's where it sort of is a problem, because we have this thing about habitable area. We've talked about this before, and it's about the ceiling height and finished surfaces, weather resistance. I mean, the testimony is, part of the reason we did this was to keep the weather out, right? So now we're talking about weather resistant. So it's starting to take the shape of habitable space. They literally did this to make it more habitable. I mean, that is the testimony so far, right? It wasn't a comfortable place to be. Stuff flew in there. It was getting mildew. We wanted to make it more habitable. We want to put air conditioning, make it more habitable. So that's why it's starting to sound habitable, okay? So that's what they.
Respectfully, that's not what the testimony was. The testimony wasn't to make it more habitable. It was to make it better for storage. He is saying that he could not store his things in there safely. There were no, I don't want to say rodents, but there were critters, I think was your word, that got in there, that things were getting mildewy, whether it was dried food, whether it was a rust on a bicycle because the salt air was getting in. He never said that he intended to make it more habitable. He said that he wanted to make it a better solution for storage for his family. That's what you heard from Mr. Kowalek tonight. And I think that that's important. And I think when you talk about intended for primarily human occupancy, which is those last couple words of that habitable area, I think, I understand what you're saying. The word "or" is in between habitable area and living accommodation. I agree, they aren't necessarily the same, and it could be one or the other, right? But when you look at habitable area and primarily intended for human occupancy, I think you are inherently speaking about a living accommodation, right? If it is intended for human occupancy, you're looking at how a human could occupy that space. And that's not what Mr. Kowalek testified to. He testified that he did it because of all the reasons that I just said, and don't need to reiterate for the board. So I think that there is an important distinction there, and I think that that's exactly what you heard from Mr. Kowalek tonight. And again, I agree with everything that Craig said in terms of this is no longer a detached garage with the removal of the garage door, and I know that we're coming here after the fact, and what Mrs. Sheehan said, I understand that if it was a requirement that the garage door be put back in, the use again may convert. But what we're saying is that what we're here on right now, because of what we're asking the board for, whether it was done or not, is for an other outbuilding, not a detached garage, because we don't meet that requirement.
All
Okay.
fair and persuasive argument, but if you put the desk in there and a TV, what is it?
It's still another outbuilding. And that's not his intent. I mean, you're listening to him and saying what his intent is. Again, what Mr. Kowalek has also offered to do as a part of his testimony, and we were going to get into this in the variance relief, but I guess that it's prudent now, is to in some way deed notice or deed restrict the use of that building. If that is helpful to the board, he is willing to do that tonight.
What would it say?
It would just say that the rear building is not to be used for human occupancy, is not occupied as another out structure.
Not just putting us right back in the pit. I mean, so now we have to do it each time. What would it say? I mean, you guys say something like it's only used for storage?
Storage, sure. I mean, you and I could figure out what it was supposed to say to convey the meaning of the ordinance, that it was used for storage. It's not intended.
We're past the ordinance now. If we're going to deed restrict, then he's going to say what his use is, and that's what it is.
Right.
If we just repeat the ordinance, then we haven't
It
got
is used, it is to be used for storage. I mean, that is what Mr. Kowalek is offering to
Well, it's
do.
also a workshop, I heard.
I mean, I think there might be a
Right.
workbench in it to put his paint on, but I don't think it's
That's
a
okay.
workshop.
I'm trying to, maybe, I can get a vibe that it's not, I feel some no's near me, so I'm trying to figure out a way to maybe get some of those people to yes for you, and if, maybe it could be locked in on what you're really doing here, because it's a zoning disaster. If everybody's just gonna start building big squared, air-conditioned, sheet-rocked buildings in their backyard, how do we, it can be anything. They can put bars back there. I mean, you don't have to have running water.
They could put a bed in there.
They can put a bed in it.
Mr. Kowalek is saying that he does not need to climate control it. If that is what the concern of the board is, that he will not put heating, it's not there. I mean, he will not put heating and air conditioning in there. And keep in mind, there was already electric in there. So the comments about it could have electric
Well,
heat. that was
most
all-
garages have electric. I don't think that's what we're
Right.
talking
Agreed.
about.
Yeah, agreed.
But most garages have garage doors.
Yes.
I know in my garage, I have probably 10 bicycles, 6 surfboards, 3 boogie boards, cornhole games, lawnmowers. There's no way that I'm getting that equipment through a single 32-inch door. It's almost impossible to go into that space. To me, this is my opinion. Taking down a garage, I would put it in a bigger garage door. You need more area to get all of our crap into the garages.
Yeah.
And taking off that garage door not only changed the use of the building, but it really limited your storage into that building. And you have several families, I would think you would need a bigger garage.
I have a question. When it becomes from a garage to an outbuilding, isn't there different requirements for setbacks?
Yes.
Because a garage, you're allowed to be closer. When it becomes an outbuilding, all of a sudden, you should be moving it off the property line.
Other outbuildings are actually more restrictive with regards to setbacks than detached garages are.
Right.
I think the side yard setback goes from 4 to 5 feet. So that's what Lindsay was saying, is that they're going to have to follow up with variances depending on, and I think we've already determined that, so, but
And doesn't it also fall in then into I guess it wouldn't be lot coverage, habitable area for the
Well,
FAR?
you reevaluate the standards. I don't think the lot coverage is not changing, the footprint has not changed. But I have questions with regards to parking. Now, you've taken a detached garage with the residential site improvement standards say that you count that as a parking space. And now, and I don't know, how many bedrooms are in this
That's
dwelling?
what my question was.
It's 6 bedrooms.
6 bedrooms. So there are 4 parking spaces that are required. So I haven't done the parking evaluation, but, you know, that's something that needs to be considered.
Yeah. I have another question. Is this a triplex?
Yes.
The house?
Yeah.
Yes.
Does that change anything when it becomes a triplex, that it could be sold off into different units?
What's a triplex? That's not a zoning term.
I mean, it's a 3-story house. It's, yeah.
I didn't know I have 3 different entrances.
No, oh, no, no.
No, it's a
That's what I
single-family
mean.
residential.
It's a single-family house.
It's 3 units, right?
That's what I,
It's one single-family.
It's a single-family house.
do you have 3 different entrances into the house that are separate?
No, no, no.
Okay, that was just,
No,
Who
there's
said
a-
triplex? Who used the term triplex?
yeah, I thought I
I
had
thought the
seen.
applicant used, I was like, well,
No, he said yes. When she asked if it was triplex, he said yes, and he meant it was 3 stories. It is
Oh,
a
it doesn't have
single
3
family.
kitchens.
There are not 3
No, no, no,
kitchens.
no, no,
There are
no,
not
no,
3
no, no.
separate
that's
entrances.
good.
Single,
That was a-
single-family house.
Single
that's
family.
That's in the record, that's
Single
it.
family.
Okay,
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, no, single family.
For you. So what's the service in the garage? I couldn't find that on the drawing.
What's the, I'm sorry, what's the what?
Size of the service going into the garage.
Well, it's not a separate service, but it's, I believe it's fed by, it's either a 40 or 60 amp breaker or something like that,
Off the main.
off the main panel.
House?
Yeah.
So is it 120, 240, 400, what is it?
Well, the main service in the house is a 200 amp service.
People use their garages for storage and for workshops all the time. So, I mean, that in and of itself is not, I don't think that should offend everybody. I mean, and my father always had like a big heater in his garage because he worked in there and it was cold, and he, like the big blower heater wasn't like, so I mean, I get that people use their garages for all kinds of stuff. But when you get out of garage and you make it 4 walls, 2 doors and windows, it just gets more confusing for the board, you know, it's just more challenging, so.
Turns into another outbuilding.
well, and I
It
just,
It doesn't
does.
automatically convert to
It does.
second principal use on the structure for primary residence, right? I mean, people have sheds on their property.
There's outbuildings that obviously aren't for human occupancy.
Right.
Ones that aren't heated, that are wide open, that are like a gazebo. There's all kinds of things that can be an outbuilding.
Right.
That doesn't look like it's designed to be for human occupancy. But once you totally close it in with windows and doors and insulate it and put heating and air conditioning in it, it sounds like something that humans are intended to occupy. Not necessarily take a shower, but to sleep in, to watch TV, to have a dance studio, all the things that can be done in a, so that's what's causing the challenge. So there's plenty of outbuildings that look nothing like this, that are nothing like this. So when he says, well, I won't air condition it, I think that's persuasive to the board. That starts to sound like a storage area.
Well, and I think what you heard Mr. Kowalik say is that he's hearing what the board is saying and that he will agree to not install heating and air conditioning in the outbuilding. He has also agreed to provide a deed notice or restriction, however you want to word it, that the outbuilding is to be used solely for storage. So I think that those are 2 things that should provide comfort to the board in the concerns about any type of occupancy of the rear building.
yeah,
Now
see,
you're out of my area, that's persuading them. That
yeah.
makes
See,
sense.
I have an issue with the fact, oh, we took away the garage door because we didn't want to replace it. To me, if it were just replacing the garage door, you know, I don't think there would be as much of an issue with the fact that you took away the garage door and put a regular door, to me, becomes, it's a building, it's not a garage, and it's habitable.
Do you feel that doing your report is going to help? Or
Is the board done asking questions?
should we do Craig's report just to bring on some more clarity?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I interrupted you, I just wanted to.
No, it's, I'll
Do your
highlight
report,
what
the
I
whole
need to
thing.
highlight, I think. So, my review is dated December 31st, 2024. So there's two things going on in this report. There is variance language in there, so if they're not successful with the appeal, so if you think that the zoning officer interpreted the ordinance wrong and then that's how you should address the appeal. If you feel that he ruled correctly and interpreted the ordinance correctly, then you should acknowledge that he made the correct decision. So that's the appeal. And then there's, on the backside of this, depending on how you review that appeal and decide on that appeal, then variances could be required, and I'll go through those. So this is a project located in the R2 district. You've heard testimony from the applicant. They've essentially converted a detached garage into an other outbuilding, which is a defined section, and we have code requirements for that. With regards to the completeness review, with regards to, and I'm just going to go through the review as it is, but I'm kind of mixing and matching as I go through the review. As far as the completeness review with regards to the appeal, I did believe they gave you enough information to review and determine and make a decision. So therefore, I recommended deeming that portion of it complete. With regards to the C variances and D variances, they've asked for waivers from items 2, 4, 19, 22, 28, 33. Because of the nature of this and because there was no changes proposed and impact any of those, I did support those waivers and did recommend deeming it complete. Now, Ms. Newcomb mentioned that a D variance could be required, and they didn't notice that. I think it would make sense not to address the variances tonight and deal with them all together. Does that make sense? If there's a D variance required?
If it's D variance required.
Right, so tonight, I think it might be prudent just to address the appeal.
I think that it depends how the appeal goes.
Okay.
Right?
I'll leave that to you.
Yeah,
Rich.
that's fine. Sir, if it is decided tonight that we do require a D variance, I understand we will need to come back before the board.
Okay. So, okay, did support the completeness. Once again, this is an R2 district. I question the use with regards to the detached garage or other outbuilding. If that has habitable space in it, it changes that, and therefore the use could be non-conforming and therefore need a D variance. I highlight that and illustrate that on page 3 of 9 of my report. And then I deal with the outbuilding requirements itself, and there is an error in there because under the dwelling accessory uses, depending on how you, I think we've already acknowledged that it is an other outbuilding. I'm kind of pivoting as we go. We have determined it is another outbuilding. There is a rear yard setback because we've changed the use, and it's existing non-conforming, and there would be a side yard setback requirement. I indicate 4. Other outbuildings are required to have a 5-foot setback from all required yards. So that 4 number would change to 5, and where that is existing non-conforming at 0.8 feet. Okay, so with regards to the appeal, the zoning officer who is here tonight, so you're going to hear from him, I think, he indicated the notice of violation was issued, excuse me. The notice of violation was issued and cited non-compliance with section 525.8, which is the conformity of regulations, 525-15A2C, which is residential accessory uses, and that could be the use variance that's required. From section 525-55A3 for detached garages, and I think the applicant has conceded that that is no longer a detached garage and is indeed the following section, 525-55A4, other outbuildings. And then finally, from section 52578, from getting a building permit, or the requirements of the building permit. So we've talked about, and the section 3 on page 5 of 9, I offer the code requirements, these various sections. I think the important ones are 525-15R2, which is a low, medium density residential district. Under accessory uses, they're permitted residential accessory uses, but they're subject to section 525-55. And that contains the requirements for accessory uses for detached garages, other outbuildings, and that's what we were talking about. So I'm going to skip over the dwelling accessory uses and go right to other outbuildings. And if you take a look at that section, and Rich already highlighted on the top of page 6 of 9, subsection E says, no outbuildings may be used for human habitation or living accommodations. I think that is the most important part of that section. And then I'm going to roll into the definitions on page 4. I'm section 4, page 7 of 9. So habitable area. This is the important definition, I believe. So a habitable area has to be, by definition, an interior finished room enclosed by a floor, ceiling, and permanent weather-resistant walls, which has a minimum floor-to-ceiling height of 6.5 feet, which is intended primarily for human occupancy. So, do we have an interior finished room?
Yes.
Yes.
It has sheetrock, right? It's enclosed. It's enclosed by a floor, ceiling, and permanent weather-resistant walls. I think it meets all of that criteria. It has a minimum floor-to-ceiling height of at least 6.5 feet, meets that criteria. Now, what you need to interpret is which is intended primarily for human occupancy. I think that's the nexus of your determination of that. Now, I'm going to move on to section 5. The denial of the zoning application cites that a variance required for the change of use. It appears the zoning officer ruled that a detached garage was converted to an other outbuilding. The following definitions are appropriate for review. So we have the definition of a detached garage. I think it's converted. It's now another outbuilding. Now, other outbuildings are not a defined term in the code definitions. So, they're generally used for structures that do not meet the strict definitions of detached garages. And it's more of an all-encompassing, if it's not a detached garage, it's kind of another outbuilding. Okay. The other pertinent definition is for living accommodations, because if you remember, going back to that subsection E, it said it can't be used for human habitation or living accommodations. So we have a definition for living accommodations, and that says kitchens, bathing facilities, sleeping quarters, toilets and toilet facilities, or, and this is the important part, or any other improvements intended to support human habitation. So I think that's another portion of that definition that you should be considering with regards to whether the zoning officer made the correct determination or not. Okay, so there's my comments for the appeal. And then, should variances be required? And once again, these are the ones that were listed, and these are the ones that stood out at the time of review. We've now heard more information with regards to this application. So we would have a variance for the residential accessory use. Strike number 2 because it's no longer a detached garage, and we're dealing with the section on other outbuildings, which is number 3. And then for rear and side yard setbacks, we now have a change of use with non-conforming rear and side yard setbacks, so we would need relief from those sections. And then under the general review comments, I've asked the applicant to revise the zoning table. We now have some information with regards to the request for information under number 2. The applicant has indicated there are 6 bedrooms. That would require a total of 4 parking spaces. and they would have to be demonstrated that they can be provided on the lot, or you would need a parking variance. And then the rest of these, 3 through 9, are my standard conditions that I usually affix to any board application that is granted favorable approval, with the exception of 7. They've indicated is not in the HPC, so I don't think HPC approval would be required. So that is a summary of my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions the board has.
Great. Question for you. Under 52555, Section 4, which I think you outlined on page 5 at the bottom,
Okay?
the applications or the request before us doesn't meet those standards. Is that correct?
The other outbuilding, if you were to build it, if you were to take this and build a new other outbuilding, it does not, no, it would not. This conversion of this structure is a structure that does not meet the requirements of other outbuildings.
Of outbuildings.
With regards to setbacks.
Correct.
And possibly,
And-
however, the human habitation or living accommodations, depending on how you interpret the definition.
And the height is different for other outbuildings.
The height, I don't think we have a height issue on this one.
Maximum height of
Oh,
10
10
feet?
feet?
10 feet.
Depending on the slant of the roof, though.
There's no height dimension on this plan, so I'm going to leave that,
I just,
I'm going to leave that an open,
I'm just interested in
Question.
clarification that under Section 4, since we've now agreed that this is another outbuilding. I think
Yeah.
that's what we've all agreed.
so if
So then-
you're correct, that before a detached garage would have a maximum height of 18 feet.
Right.
Other outbuildings have a maximum height of 10 feet.
Right.
So that's in play.
So I guess where I'm going with this is that being another outbuilding versus detached garage, the application or the request in front of it doesn't meet all of the conditions of that section of 525.
No, and I think that the applicant has indicated that should they need to come back, they would have to address that variance issue.
Okay, that's, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I agree. You're right. There are several variances. If this is categorized as an other outbuilding, in agreement that there is no intent for human occupancy, variance relief is required. I don't think variance relief for height is required because it's 10 feet plus 5 based on the slope of the roof, but,
No, I don't think you get that support. It's only, that is only for single-family dwellings.
okay. Well, so maybe it would need a height variance, but the point is, we acknowledge that we would need variance relief, and that will be a subsequent, whether it was tonight or another night, application. But in terms of the appeal and what's before the board at this exact moment is whether or not this structure, it really boils down to, is intended for human occupancy. And that's what's here right now. The other issues of variance relief are a subsequent issue.
Well, I would disagree with you, that I think you're before us to challenge the zoning officer's position. And if we've all agreed that it's another outbuilding, then that section of the 525 code is in play. And you don't meet all the requirements under Section 4.
And that's why we would require variance relief from those
You'd
standards.
have to come back. Is where
Right, this
I'm
is,
going.
Yes.
this is a process.
Yes.
So I think what we're doing tonight is taking care of the first item, which is the appeal. So you guys are going to vote on the appeal, and that's going to tell the applicant which way they need to approach the rest of this, if there is a rest of it.
Right. Yes, I agree with that. But in deciding whether or not this is, I think we've all acknowledged this is no longer a detached garage, right? So it has to be some kind of structure. It's an accessory structure. And the catch-all in Cape May City Code for accessory structures that aren't detached garages are other outbuildings. And so that's what we're here for an interpretation on. I understand and agree that we do not meet the bulk standards of an other outbuilding. To the extent we are that, we need to come back separately for that relief. I agree with you.
And what was the zoning officer's decision based on? Has he testified?
Well, he's
I
here
don't wanna
tonight,
speak for
so
Bruce,
he
yeah.
can tell us, but the appeal, his decision is summarized on the top of page 5 of 9 of my report.
And the,
Cited section 525.8, 525.15A2C, 525.55A4, and 525.78. And he did, and that notice of violation is attached to my application. I hope you have it.
it was submitted with the application, yes.
Yeah.
I do have a question about the parking spaces. I know you would need to see that, but do you have 4 parking spaces on the lot?
For sure. I mean, we can easily get 2 cars in front of the structure, and then we've got a long driveway that we can, it's not uncommon for us to have, 4 or 5 cars stacked in the driveway.
And again, I think that while that's certainly prudent information for the board, that kind of comes as part of that later application when we get there, if we get there.
And just as a matter of correction, there is a parking calculation indicated on the grid on my plan.
Okay, there's no bedroom count.
Okay,
That was the question, was
okay.
Just 6 bedrooms.
Actually, I do have a question for I would like to hear from the construction official, because I have a question for him.
Are you calling him up as opening to the public or just calling him up?
Calling them up.
Thank you.
As part of the application.
Thank you.
You swear or affirm the testimony you give is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
The thing that I'm struggling with is we can't be the first ones to think of this. And, this human occupancy question, I don't understand occupancy to mean sleeping accommodations. People occupy rooms for all different kinds of reasons, okay? And the construction code talks about this. And there's actually a definition, and I'm always confused by the construction. Whenever attorneys dive into the Uniform Construction Code, we get a little lost in the sauce. This is the 2021 IB International Building Code, New Jersey edition. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I know there's multiple codes, but I think that's the one they use.
Yeah, that's actually the construction department, not zoning.
Okay, but nevertheless, they do have a definition of occupiable space.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a room or enclosed space designed for human occupancy in which individuals congregate for amusement, educational, or similar purposes, or in which occupants are engaged at labor, and which is equipped with means of egress and light and ventilation facilities meeting the requirements of this code. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but what do you look to determine, or what did you look to determine that
Okay,
this was
so
an area intended for human occupancy?
I look at it, so generally on other outbuildings, detached structures, I do not allow sheetrock. It's bare stud if it's detached, because the part where any other elements that lend to human habitation, that's the way I view it. That's my interpretation. So this particular one actually came about because a complaint came into the building department, and the inspector went out and found it, and then I was called over. So there's been a lot of work done in here. I mean, listening, it kind of was like was all here. We just kind of freshened it up. I don't believe that's the case. Walls were built on the interior that turned this into 3 rooms. The front room with the single door going into it, I believe that's absolutely storage. There's no windows. It's one door in. It's a 10 by 12 size room. dark if you don't turn the light on, so I believe that will be storage. The other two rooms, to me, they look like they're prime to be habitable space. I know the pictures in my thing are small. I do have a couple bigger ones you could use as exhibits if you want to see what it really looks like.
Yes.
But the main room is sizable, and then off to the side is a smaller one where the refrigerator is. There's lots of electric that was installed, and in the smaller room where the refrigerator is, the electric's all up at counter height, as though maybe cabinets will go in, maybe a workbench will go in, I don't know. But if you want to get a look at this is
Now, can you show the council first, see if there's any objection, and then you can give it to us?
That's inside? No.
Are they just the larger pictures that were part of your,
There are two of them, yeah.
okay, two of the four?
Is this what it looks like now?
That's what it looks like now. So there's no flooring in it because the job was posted with a stop work order. So who knows what would have been there? I believe maybe it'll be, epoxy, could be.
I'm going to mark this Z1 and Z2.
But,
No, I took these.
They look almost exactly.
yeah, it's a big issue with these accessory structures and the habitable space, and I can't, obviously, like, part of, as the zoning officer, I have to inspect every property that sells, and, I mean, it's ridiculous the amount of space that's converted into living space that then I end up making them have to tear out. So I denied this because when I went there and saw everything, the first thing I do, I go back to the office, I pull the block and lot file on the property and look into the history of it and what's there. Was any of this permitted? Did they get permits for any of this stuff? Was it allowed? And all I could find in the block and lot file were the original permits and plans for the addition on the garage. So in the file, it's one big room, one big garage. Now it's three. So right now, technically, it's still a detached garage. Unless they get a variance for it to be another outbuilding, it's still a detached garage. So part of being a detached garage, one of the requirements is you have to be able to park at least one car in it, okay? Can't do that here. So the variance, so the denial I gave is once they got caught, I believe he submitted applications to the construction department for the work that was done. And part of it was he had to apply to zoning too for the change of use, which I obviously denied because the change of use to go from the garage to the other outbuilding requires variances. So that's pretty much what happened.
Did I understand you to say that you saw permits for an addition to the garage?
I'm not sure on that now. I kind of think it was originally one size and they added out the side of it, but it's been months. But that was all permitted. That was allowed.
Okay.
Yeah, if that was the case. But the plans show it as one large garage, not divided up like it is. So at the very least, there were never any permits pulled for the additional electrical work on the interior walls, which is now all covered up, can't be inspected.
If the applicant were to put the garage door back, take down some of the interior walls, everything would be fine?
Yeah, if it goes back to the way it was, yeah. Right? I mean, you always have the option to go back to what it was.
But he could still fix up walls and clean it up as he wants to inside, put insulation in?
Well, the thing is, I generally don't approve sheetrock in detached garages, okay? He says it was there. If he can prove that it was there, okay. If he has pictures, old pictures of it,
My thinking is that it would not be really habitable space if there's a garage, there's a car in it.
Right. Right.
That kind of.
So generally, what I've been doing is if it's an attached garage, they can sheetrock it. It's attached to the house, okay? But when they're detached, too many of them are being converted. So I require it be bare stud.
Okay, but aside from your general practices, what we're deciding tonight is strictly whether, when you denied this, when you did not approve this.
Change of use.
Whether you were, where's your thing? Craig, I just read it. Just the error part. I just wrote it.
Erred, have that language in
Here it is. I underlined it. Whether there is an error in any order, requirement, decision, or refusal made by the building inspector or any other administrative official. So we're deciding whether you made an error that we're being asked to decide. So, and your decision was that this requires a variance
variance.
as habitable space.
And as an other outbuilding.
I don't think they deny that, though. So they're not claiming you made an error on that decision. The error that they're claiming is that you believe that this is habitable space and therefore is not
Yes.
permitted use.
Yep.
And that's what the board's deciding. I think we all agree on that, right? How they vote is up to them.
Sure.
Anything else for me? Okay.
So a couple comments, I guess, or points that I think are important to reiterate on is, first, that 3 of these 4 walls were previously insulated. So that's not new. The garage door removal is new, and I understand that. And I understand the point that you're making. If you put a garage door back,
And a car in there.
and you could fit a car in there, whatever size that car may be, that perhaps this becomes a detached garage again. I understand the
This
point.
sort of is mute then.
I understand I understand the point that you were making. So, but I think it's important to keep in mind that adding this insulation, it was already there. So if insulation is the magic thing that happens, that converts to human occupancy, it was already there. And if the position is human occupancy means that an area is insulated or there is a partition wall, which is what I'm hearing, every detached garage and other outbuilding in the city of Cape May can only have studs. They cannot be insulated. Otherwise, they are fit for human occupancy, right? That's what the decision that we are appealing is. Because I don't believe that there is a basis in the city code on which that is where human occupancy turns.
That's not his ruling.
I don't believe that that's, because the part of the definition of habitable area, the first part of it says, "an interior finished room." And I believe it's the zoning officer's interpretation is, when you put sheetrock on it, it becomes an interior finished room. So it's part of that definition.
Right, that's
my impression, and he's here, I mean, we can ask him, but
I think that's what I was just trying to reiterate, right? If you meet the 6.5-foot ceilings, the floor, and that the walls are insulated, you have now created space for human
You said
occupancy.
insulated or sheet rock? To me, that's two different things.
Sorry, sheetrock.
Sheet rock,
Yeah,
okay,
sorry, I'm
okay.
not,
I want to make that clear. Yeah.
yes, sheetrocked.
And if I might, the prior condition met that definition already.
No, because you had a garage door that wasn't insulated and sheetrocked.
The whole building wasn't enclosed.
Yeah.
It's a change.
Well, it was enclosed as far, I mean, a door is a form of enclosure. I mean, we don't consider a door not to be part of the enclosure of the building. The walls, the doors, the windows all contribute to the envelope of the building, the roof.
But I hear the lawyer saying it was already insulated, but I haven't heard the owner say that it was insulated and sheetrocked beforehand.
Oh, I apologize. I thought Mr. Cowlick.
I'm just saying, just for
Yeah, sure.
technicality,
I
Bruce
can't
is
touch-
saying he's not really sure if it was already done before or not, and that's, you're making a statement, but
Steve, was
he's under oath for that statement,
Steve, there was insulation,
Absolutely.
and
The same insulation is still there.
and the drywall was,
Correct.
Well,
There was drywall.
well,
Yes.
I thought he told us that he replaced some of that because of the mold and everything else.
The sheetrock was replaced, the insulation remained.
Sorry, say that again?
The sheetrock was replaced, but the insulation
Okay,
remained.
'cause, yeah, the picture looks like that's brand new sheet rock.
The sheetrock is new, correct.
So again, we've made it apparent, right? Our position is that this addition of a wall that is insulated with sheetrock does not change the use of the building to be intended primarily, read it so I don't mess up, intended primarily for human occupancy. That is our position. And I guess what we are appealing is the decision that because this has a 6-foot ceiling, that it is enclosed by a floor and a ceiling, that because this wall is now insulated, that it has become intended primarily for human occupancy, which again would mean that detached garages and other outbuildings in the city, if they have 6-foot ceilings and have a 6.5, and have a floor and a ceiling with weather-resistant walls, have to be at their studs.
I'm not, I don't know about that, because as everyone's pointed out, when there's a garage door, that part of it does not have, it's not airtight. I mean.
That's why I didn't say garage.
I am trying to, when the testimony is that the garage door made the place drafty and leaves got in and all that, okay? That sounds garage-ish, okay? And that is an area that's not temperature controlled and all of that. When you seal the whole thing in and drywall and insulate it, the building inspector views that different than just a garage. It starts to look like a place that you.
We agree that it's not a garage. It is
Then why
not
are you
a
talking about
garage.
garages at all? You're trying to change what we're voting on by saying, well, now you're saying that every garage that has drywall is intended for human occupancy. We're saying, no, when it's a garage, we don't have to get into whether there's human occupancy.
Respectfully, Rich, that's not what I just said. I said that
I
in the
misheard you.
city, that's okay. I said that in the city, if there are other outbuildings as accessory structures that meet the requirements of habitable area and are insulated with drywall, they are now fit for human occupancy. Primarily intended for human occupancy. That is what I said. I didn't say that for garages because we're not a
Okay.
garage.
Then I think the answer to that is yes. I mean, that's it, yes.
That's the zoning officer's decision. I understand that, and that's what we're appealing.
If people put up buildings that are insulated and look like they're going to be temperature controlled and have windows and doors, and they put them in their backyard, then yes, I think our building inspector is going to say, hey, that looks like that's intended for human occupancy. That's an outbuilding. I don't know what that thing is. It's not a garage. It's not a gazebo. It's not a storage shed. It looks like a place that humans are going to be comfortable in and do things in and have a dance studio or an office or something. And we regulate that differently than we do garages and things that don't look like that. Now, people may want one of those, and someone may come in and say, I'm an artist. I want an art studio. I want to put this back here. Can I do that? And if everybody's persuaded that the benefits outweigh the detriments and they vote on it, then fine. But as a first line of defense, our building inspector is going to say, that's not okay.
Sure, listen, that is what we are appealing, right? You might be saying you don't agree with me, which is what I'm hearing, but I don't, that is what we are appealing, that decision. We don't agree with it. And this board is going to vote however they're going to vote on it, and I understand that. But our first step in this process with Mr. Kowalek's building is an appeal of that decision of the zoning officer. If Mr. Kowalek decides to come back, because your decision is that it is habitable space, and ask for some type of relief like you just talked about, then that is the next step in his process. But the first step was an appeal of the zoning officer's decision.
This is almost an interpretation.
No, there's a section in their ordinance. I'm learning things as I go here. Definition 258-9. It's our flood stuff. Okay? And in that, it has this paragraph. Habitable building. And it says, means a building that is intended for regular human occupation and/or residence. Examples of a habitable building include a single-family home, duplex, multi-residence building, a commercial building such as a retail store, restaurant, office building, or gymnasium, an accessory structure that is regularly occupied, such as a garage, barn, or workshop. Mobile and manufactured homes, trailers intended for human residence. So it's talking about places where humans do things as a habitable building. So I think when you put whatever our habitable thing says, right? 6'5", drywall, and is a place where humans are going to be doing stuff. I think our ordinance is viewing that as habitable area, space, habitable building, being occupied by humans. So I don't think, I mean, the board's going to vote.
I think it's up to the board to decide that.
It is.
And it's okay, right?
It's up to me to try to point out parts of the ordinance that are relevant. I mean, you're welcome to do that as well. I mean, you may have state cases or statutes, but I'm just trying to do my job and read through this ordinance, and I'm searching the word human in our ordinance. And that's what I'm finding, you know?
Were there separate rooms? Were 3 separate rooms in there? Was it 2 separate rooms, no separate rooms?
So originally, it was just one big space. I wouldn't characterize it as 3 rooms. We've carved out one room which left an L-shaped larger space. So I would characterize it as 2 rooms currently.
So you're trying to have one space that you're going to put a door on and lock stuff in or something like that? Is that the?
Right, so there's one, as I mentioned earlier, there's one smaller room that opens directly onto the driveway with its own door, and then the door on the side leads into the L-shaped space.
Was there the garage door was in the front. Was there also another door in the front, or is that door is always on the side?
The door was always on the side, yeah. Originally, the door in the front spanned almost the full width of the structure.
Thank you. Public comment?
T. So are there any more questions from the board?
Another relevant section is our floor area ratio definition, and that is the sum of the area of all floors of the habitable areas of buildings or structures, open paren, not including attics, basements, porches, decks, or other areas not designed or intended for human habitation. So attics, basements, porches, decks.
Just going
I'm
to
sorry, I'm just
open
going
it.
through trying to see if
You're right,
there's-
if I open it up to the public,
Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
nobody here. Open it up to the public within 200 feet. Seeing none, open to the public beyond 200 feet. And seeing none, close to the public.
You're here, May? Oh,
What,
I would let Ms. Duca make her,
you have something else you would like to say?
Sure. Yeah, I'll be brief. I mean, we have probably ad nauseum discussed what primarily intended for human occupancy means. Again, it's our position that the addition of one dry-walled insulated wall and the removal of a garage door does not create a space that's intended primarily for human occupancy. We don't believe that that's consistent with the definitions that are in the code or with, again, the intent here. You've heard from Mr. Kowalek that he is not only willing to deed restrict the space for storage, but is also willing to not climate control the space, all of which I think make clear the intent to not be primarily for human occupation. Again, we understand that there are other conditions that would need to be met in terms of variance relief. If this was, if you agree with us, we would need to address variance relief. But that's our position tonight, and we appreciate your time. I know it's taken a bit.
I will tell you that I've given Ms. Newcomb a bit of a hard time, only because I'm trying to think through this myself. but it's not as clear as I am making it sound. No, it uses the term human habitation and living accommodation. Then it also, habitable area says human occupancy, not human habitation, human occupancy. So it is, it is challenging. We've done our best to try to define things that are hard to define. But what you're being asked to do tonight is to decide if your building inspector committed an error when he concluded that this particular structure, as viewed by him, as described by the witnesses, is something that is, falls within the definition of
Habitable area.
No,
Or living
whether it falls under the definition of, whether it falls under section E, no outbuilding may be used for human habitation or living accommodation. Your board engineer has directed you to some helpful indicators in the ordinance, including the definition of habitable area to help you understand what human habitation means. And that describes it as an interior finished room enclosed by a floor, ceiling, and permanent weather-resistant walls, which has a minimum floor to ceiling height of 6.5 feet, which is intended primarily for human occupancy. The applicant has argued that this, you should also look to this part of living accommodations, which talks about kitchen, bathing facilities, sleeping quarters, toilets, and toilet facilities, or any other improvements intended to support human habitation. And since human habitation seems to imply the things that are living accommodations, and the term in section E is human habitation, the applicant wants you to look at it and say, hey, that's intended for things that look like sleeping quarters, second primary uses. And Ms. Newcomb has articulated that she doesn't believe that to be the case. And there's, support for that position in the ordinance. As I think I just read it, that's the support, that it does, the human habitation words come from the section on living accommodations. And those start to sound like places that you sleep and bathe and have kitchens. So you need to weigh all that information. I also read you a couple other sections that I might not be able to find. Oh, I took a picture of it. I did. I read you some other sections that might be of interest. If I can find my photos, I'll tell you. A section of our ordinance relating to flood that talks about garages, barns, or workshops being areas that are intended for human occupation, not habitation, occupation, but it may be helpful to you understand. So you need to decide if your zoning officer made an error in his determination. I hope that's a helpful summary. Ms. Newcomb, if I misstated anything, I tried to give a relatively balanced summary.
I just
That's the
have,
gist.
so we're no longer a garage that can house a car.
Everyone agrees we're not
So-
in garage.
No matter what, you have to come back for some variance relief because the building is sitting in an area that doesn't conform if it's not a garage.
Yes, we do.
Yes, but they have noticed for that variance tonight. So if you conclude that this is an appropriate outbuilding, then you can vote on whether or not they're entitled to a variance for the location of the outbuilding. But if you find that it's an outbuilding that is intended for human habitation or living accommodation, then they need a different kind of variance. They need a use variance for that. So the first thing you're voting on is whether your building inspector made an error when he concluded that this was not an appropriate outbuilding, because this outbuilding, he believes, is intended, or actually what it says is, no outbuilding may be used for human habitation, and he believes this is an outbuilding that appears to him to be intended to be used for human habitation.
I'll make that motion and vote on it.
Is that?
Okay, Mr. Walsh motioned, Mr. Ledwin second.
Just to clarify, the motion, we need to say this in very particular. Is your motion, we always do it as a motion, like an affirmative kind of thing. So your motion is to affirm the,
Denial.
the decision of the zoning official?
Correct.
And then, so if you vote yes, you're affirming it. If you vote no, you're rejecting it. Okay? And just so you know, rejecting it means that you are saying that it, it is not intended for habitable space, and they'll move on to the next vote. Okay? So, but yes is to support the building inspector, no is to reverse him. Ms. Lindsay, Ms. Newcomb, does that vote sound the vote we're supposed to be doing? Okay, that's the vote we're supposed to be doing, so go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Walsh motion, Mr. Ledwin second. Mr. Ledwin?
Support the zoning officer, yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Ms. Sheehan?
Yes, I support the zoning officer. I believe it's human habitation. It may be used for, there's rooms that's separated and it's insulated, so human habitation is possible in that room, please.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Can you just give, Ms. Sheehan gave some reasons, can you just articulate some reasons why you voted the way you voted, Sam? Go ahead, if you could do that.
And I did because I, as well, see it as habitable space once you put drywall in and take the garage door off. And also, I appreciate that, the gesture of no longer, putting any climate control in. However, down the road, if the house was ever sold, it's not, stopping someone else from putting climate control, heating, or air conditioning into the structure.
And you have mine that they're separated rooms that I put in there.
I said and these are just my notes, right, I'm typing quick. I said she believes it is for human habitation, rooms are separated and insulated.
Okay, thank you.
I heard what you said. I said he sees this habitable space because there is drywall, and even though, and then I stopped, but I'm about to say, even though they talked about not having heating this time, it looks like it can be heated.
And I affirm what Sam said, is that the possibility down the road, even if not at the moment.
Okay, and I appreciate those comments. I just want to reiterate, though, that what you're voting on is not anything that they offered
Right.
to do. You're voting on whether your building inspector erred. If they want to alter what they're doing and submit new plans to have them considered by the building inspector,
No, that's
Then he'll
fine.
decide that.
I'm saying that that was correct.
right, I understand. Okay,
Rich?
all right, good luck.
We do have a sheet of bills here that we need a motion to approve.
Second.
Mr. Ledwin motions, Mrs. Notch seconds. Mr. Ledwin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Ms. Sheehan? Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
And if there's no other business, we need a motion to adjourn.
Yes.
Motion?
Motion.
Ms. Sheehan motions, all in favor?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Turn off your mics.